Okay, we're going to be ready to start the press conference
You know what?
for Elvis.
Oh, okay, all right.
Probably, I can say, the most rock and roll press conference of the week.
Oh, yeah.
All right, let me introduce to you the person with us today. To my left, the producer, one of the producers of the film, Sky Schuler-Weiss. The co-producer and costume designer extraordinaire, Catherine Martin. To the other side of the table, Patrick McCormick, one of the producers. Next to him, Gail Berman, one of the producers also. Next to her is the actress, Olivia De Jong. And ladies and gentlemen, Elvis is in the building, Austin Butler.
Austin.
We have here Alton Mason, sorry.
Looking ridiculously cool.
The Colonel Tom Hanks. And for once, we're going to ask this gentleman to do a little less action, but a little more conversation. Monsieur le réalisateur, Baz Luhrmann. All right, guys, we're going to start the press conference very soon, but I want to start by what happened yesterday after the screening. I mean, it was crazy. Baz, this emotion that you felt, how can you describe it?
Well, you know, like I said yesterday, when I made my first film and we were dropped by the distributor with one cinema, Cannes saved our cinematic life. And I think standing there amongst that emotion was for our film, because our film is made for one thing and one thing only, to bring audiences into the theatre. It is a theatrical film. We meant to make it theatrical. And I think that ovation was as much for the film as it was for the idea of cinema, of the theatre. And I was in a theatre full of love for cinema. Yeah, it meant the world. And Cannes, I think, has saved us once again. That's what I think.
Let's, if you don't mind, continue with you, Baz. Very simple question, at the same time very complicated. Why Elvis?
Well, you know, I'm a great admirer of when Shakespeare takes a historical figure but explores a larger idea, you know? And also one of my favorite films growing up was Milos Forman's Amadeus. Now, is Amadeus really about Mozart? Is it about Mozart? Or is it about jealousy between Salieri and Mozart, and him saying, God, I did everything right, and you put all that talent in that horrible, grotesque person? It's about jealousy. And I wanted to take Elvis's life and really respect him and his fans and the love people have for that character, but also show that it's an exploration of America in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and the relationship between the cell and the art. It's the show and the business, you know, the snowman and the showman. So that's what the big idea really is. But on the way there, on the research, on the living in the South, on being embraced by Graceland, and on a whole journey, I learned about Elvis Elvis the person in the most unexpected way. That will stay with me all my life. When you can think one thing about someone and come out the other end and realize something completely different.
Let's talk with the snowman and the showman. Tom, you have never been afraid of ambiguous character. You have never been afraid of gray, shade of gray in the way you play your characters. This one needed that. This one needed totally to be on the border of the good and bad, or the border of what makes a good friend and an enemy. It's how do you play that? How do you play this ambiguity?
I am a professional.
Yes, you are, sir.
I am paid to put on different people's clothes and pretend to be somebody else. Turn it into I pay the rent, so I feel lucky. I must owe all of this to this man, Baz Luhrmann. He came and sat down with me. All I knew was Baz Luhrmann would like to talk to you about Elvis. And I thought, well, that would be a waste of time. But when he came in, he said there would have been no Elvis without Colonel Tom Parker. There would have been no Colonel Tom Parker without Elvis. It was a symbiotic relationship. I did not know what Colonel Tom Parker looked like. I had never heard his voice. I thought he would be a tall, stentorian guy in a hat full of bombast, and instead he turned out to be this rather ingenious imp of the carnival who seemed to enjoy robbing a little kid out of an extra 25 cents for a photograph of Elvis just as much as he enjoyed robbing a casino in Las Vegas out of $25 million. It was the same exact pleasure that he got, not from the amount of money, but from the exchange. Baz talked about the Colonel as this great carny, knowing that the carny's job is to bring people to the glittering lights on the outside of town, promise them something they've never experienced before, and then almost giving it to them at a cost. And when he said that, I think the conversation lasted 7 minutes until I said, I'm your man. Now, please show me a picture of what the Colonel looks like. Then he showed me, and I thought, oh, my God, what have I done?
True story. True story.
The showman now. Austin, very simple. What does it take to become Elvis and to play Elvis?
A lot of work. I basically put the rest of my life on pause for 2 years, and I just absorbed everything that I possibly could, and I just went down the rabbit hole of obsession, and I broke down his life into periods of time where I could hear the differences in how his voice changed over the years and how his movement changed over the years, and I spent 2 years studying and trying to find his humanity as much as I could through that, because that's the tricky thing is you see Elvis as this icon or as the wallpaper of society, and finding the way to strip all that away and find the very human nature of him that was deeper than all of that. That's what was fascinating for me, and the ability to get to explore that was just the joy of my life, for sure.
Olivia, it's a question that all the actors could answer, but do you feel that we all have our own vision of the Elvis story and the people who were around him? And do you feel that there is a responsibility first to the people that live the story and to us because we have our own vision of it?
Could you please repeat that question one more time?
The responsibility to the real life characters.
Oh, my responsibility.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I think there's certainly, especially when somebody's still alive, like Priscilla is, and obviously she's here supporting the film, there's always that energy of feeling like they're on your shoulder, constantly watching, and I think you're always going to grapple with whether or not you've illuminated something real and human in them. Absolutely. I think there's a huge responsibility. I think that she is such a key part of this narrative and such a key part of his legacy, especially today. Everything that she's done, obviously, since they parted their ways is such a testament to their love. And absolutely, there's a responsibility. And the fact that she's happy and supporting the film here, it means the world. Yeah.
Alton, this is a question that all the actors can answer that, but the world of Baz is visually crazy. I mean, it's like all of them, everywhere.
Really?
I'm leaving.
But what does that mean for you guys as actors?
I think it's a super big pleasure being a part of his world because it's so powerful, and it's so spiritual, and it's gravitating and ascending. So when I first met Baz, it's kind of like I got sucked into that vortex, and I think as an actor, you should surrender to it, surrender to that feeling. I grew up in Arizona, and I have a soul tie to the southern state because I'm from Shreveport, Louisiana, on my dad's side. So I think developing that world and creating that ambiance with the film really resonated with me on a spiritual level.
We owe Alton a huge thanks because his performance as Little Richard allowed the audience to applaud the musical numbers. The first applause in the movie came from Little Richard. Rightly so. Rightly so.
And this is a question for all the producer, but maybe we'll start with you, Catherine. I think at the beginning of the film, there is a split screen with 8 different images. I mean, it's like crazy. Do you guys try to tell Baz, maybe you should not do this much? Maybe we don't need to go. Is it possible to?
I don't think that would work. I think that the fantastic thing about working with him for 30 years is that he always pushes you beyond what you think is possible or what the audience may or may not. You're on the edge of the new. And what's exciting is often you are examining historical figures or history, but his lens is always on the future. And so to me, what's exciting is I just watched the movie the other day and I'd been very irritated by him during the day. As you can imagine,
I did nothing.
As you can imagine, a husband can be. And I watch the movie analytically when I help and work on the different visual aspects of the film, even in post-production. And I watch it without sound and, I'm looking, that shoe's terrible. There's a wrinkle here. Oh, that backdrop's terrible. But when I saw the movie completely together with the music, I felt that it came together as a piece of transcendent poetry that I had never expected, and I'm amazed that he can still surprise me after 30 years.
Well, she surprises me after 30 years every day, too.
The other producer, if you want to answer the question.
I would only say that, Baz's sort of film language, his cinematic technique is very distinguished, and we've seen it progress, film after film. And I thought this film was the best and most fulfilled manifestation of that sort of signature style of cinematic language. He creates information and music and feeling with images in these collages and these simultaneous screenings, these transitional moments. We had an expression in the movie called poetic glue. And there was more of it in this movie and more successfully applied in this movie than I think any of us has ever seen before.
Yeah.
When I first saw the film, from the very first frame, I knew it was a Baz Luhrmann film. The second it starts. That is an extraordinary thing to say, this filmmaker, from the moment we watch the screen, is in control of everything. And all I can say is that that was the thought from the get-go. How does this man take on that challenge and make it his own? And I think he's done it with such panache and such grace. It's been a pleasure to watch it.
Sky, you want to add something?
I think, as Baz talked about using a life as a canvas to tell a bigger idea, I think what you were talking about, Didier, what is so inspiring about working with Baz over the almost 20 years is creating a thrilling, huge entertainment, a great spectacle that also reveals deeper emotions and bigger ideas. So when you have these multiple split screens, when you have this spectacle going on in front of you during the film, you walk away feeling deeper feelings and lasting bigger thoughts.
All right, we're going to open the floor to questioning. Monsieur?
Hi, I'm Robert from the Netherlands. Thank you so much for your dazzling film. I've got 2 questions for Mr. Hanks. you're not well known for playing unlikable characters in your career. Can you elaborate on how did you prepare for doing this role and making him a bit likable maybe? And because I'm from the Netherlands, I have to ask, did you dive into his Dutch descent and his Dutch accent? And if the answer is yes, what did you find?
I think the Colonel, as I have heard from tons of anecdotal information, he was in fact a delightful guy. He lit up every room that he came into. Priscilla and Jerry themselves have told me that they wish he was alive today. Was he a cheap crook that played fast and loose with the money? Yeah, he was a little cheap crooky when it comes down to that, but they worked that all out to everybody's satisfaction. He was a man who brought joy into everything he did, along with just a little bit of larceny. I'm not interested in playing a bad guy just for the sake of, before I kill you, Mr. Bond, perhaps you'd like a tour of my installation. I don't, that's okay, I get it, but I think that's for other stuff. And what Baz tantalized me with right off the bat was, here was a guy who saw an opportunity to manifest a once-in-a-lifetime talent into a cultural force. He saw that. He knew that about Elvis the first time he saw Elvis's effect on an audience. There was a moment that is very much taken from fact of the Colonel seeing some guy on stage doing something he'd never heard before, wiggling like crazy, without a doubt, a powerful force, but he wasn't paying attention to what the man was doing on stage. He was paying attention to the effect of the audience that was watching him. He realized that that guy was forbidden fruit. And you can make an awful lot of money on forbidden fruit, but you can also turn that into something that is much more of a cultural exchange. I give Colonel credit for doing that very thing. And I also give him the reality of being the amount of ways that Colonel Tom Parker cheated people out of nickels and dimes and dollars is extraordinary. And by the way, I've incorporated some of those in my own life now. So you learn a little something from every role, and as far as no one knew that of the Colonel's background. And there are some extraordinary tabloidy, melodramatic stories about why he left Holland and how he did. I like to think that, yeah, he was running away from an aspect of his past. He wanted to get out of his small town. He wanted to work up in the big time. And who among us wouldn't jump at an opportunity to do that very thing? I don't know if we have to change our name particularly, but as soon as someone said, I'm going to make you an honorary colonel, Tom Parker, well, he said, well, guess what I am now? Colonel Tom Parker. And that's a mercurial and brilliant man who, at the same time, made sure he lined his own pockets. There's this I heard this great quote about Colonel Tom Parker in 1956. Someone said, so how is it, why is it that you latched on to them? And what magic are you working with Mr. Elvis the Pelvis Presley? He said, well, I tell you, last year my boy had $1 million worth of talent. This year my boy has $1 million. And I'm going to say about 10% of that was in Mr. Colonel Tom Parker's pocket. So that all worked out. God bless America, and who wouldn't jump ship in order to have an opportunity to do that? Thank you.
Rodrigo, I think you have a question.
Question to Mr. Luhrmann from Brazil and Rodrigo Fonseca from G-Show. We talk about rock and roll all the time, but I think the movie pays an incredible tribute also to blues, to soul music, and especially to Mahalia Jackson. Could you say a few words about those rhythms as well and the importance of them to Elvis' story?
Yeah, yes, I tell you, homework, research, the depth of research. I want to make acknowledgement to my team because I don't work alone on anything. And when it comes to research, I have a research team and we go and live there. We lived in Memphis. I had a space at Graceland. Whatever the character did, we do. And we do academic research and so on and so forth. But we do research in the field. And one of the great revelations was I wanted to find out about this period in which Elvis, after Dad goes to jail, ends up with his mum. Dad ends up doing work in the South. And Elvis and his mum are so poor, dirt poor. that they end up in one of the few white designated houses in the black community because they're so poor. And I even had it digitally mapped. I lived there, I had it digitally mapped, and the streets were changed and thing. And there was a gentleman alive who passed last year called Sam Bell, who's not a lot in documentaries. And we tried to find him, no response. We tried to get him, no response. And I even sent a FedEx message to his house in Tupelo. And I go down with my team, and we're there, and it's about the last few days, and the FedEx is sitting on the front door, and I go, look, he's obviously passed. It's too late. This is the last lead. And one of the younger guys says to me, so let me get this right. We're going to come all the way here to Tupelo, and you're not going to get out of the car? Because I'm a bit of a scaredy cat, to be honest. I got out of the car, and I went up. There was cobwebs around the door. It was clear there was nobody in the building. So the research guy said to me, this young guy said to me, well, let's just go around the back. I'm like, oh, my God, all right. And now be in there, break and enter, you know. So I go around the back, and an old woman comes in and says, hello. He says, oh, yes, Sam's still alive. He's in hospital, but he'll be back next week. I meet Sam Bell. He's a beautiful, older African-American man, and he tells me the story that, in fact, there are 2 green streets and a highway's over the one that they lived at. We go out to it. He points out how his backyard, his grandparents' backyard, right, in this black community. I mean, Elvis had to walk every day through, as a child, the streets of the black community, past the black school to get to the white community. But he said, you know, we became fast friends. It's in the movie. They were a gang. And they ran off to juke joints and saw Big Boy Crudup. And they went to Pentecostal tents. And that led to Elvis later in life being one of the only white faces at Club Handy, says the owner of Club Handy, on film. And you see, this is the thing about young people. They absorb all kinds of things, especially someone with a big hole in their heart like Elvis, who had a twin that he could never live up to, who had conditional love from his mother, who was always searching and seeking and absorbing. I grew up in a small town. I knew what it is to look around and go, oh, God, how should I wear my hair? How should I wear my hair? But the point is, he absorbed these things. And he also mixed it with his love of country music, white gospel. He absorbed it and mixed it. And I think the most important thing in this film is to show that a young kid, just like Eminem, grew up in a black community. Young kids don't care. Their personalities are formed by what's around them and what they absorbed. So the music that came out of Elvis was music that he absorbed, and his friendships with emerging black musicians who weren't famous, B.B. King, all these things. You see, we do our homework. So I know these things to be true. His love of gospel, when he says, that's the music I love, Mahalia Jackson, by the way, blood relatives of this man here, you know, to the day he died, he would stay up at night after 2 shows with the Sweet Inspirations, mother of which, Whitney Houston, and sing gospel music till the morning, because that was his safe place. That was where he felt safe. So to your question, and I know I took the long road around, right? It's so important to show you can make all the rules you like, but kids growing up are going to absorb things around them, and they're going to make something new. And that's really what Elvis was. He went out of his way to say, I never invented rock and roll. I just put my spin on it. He went out of his way to say, don't call me the king. I'm not the king, right? He's the king. He went out of his way. Let's face it, I'll never sing as well as, you know, B.B. King. You know, he was an incredibly sensitive, spiritual guy. That's what I discovered. Above and beyond everything else, say what you like, he was a deeply spiritual being. Long answer, I know, but you've seen my movies, right?
Helen.
Hello, Helen Barlow, covering for The Australian, based in Paris.
Hello, Helen.
Hi. I was here for Moulin Rouge, and thank you for livening up the Croisette. Because
so which was the best party?
Well, I was too busy watching Claire Denis last night, I'm sorry. But I do have a question for Tom Hanks about filming in Queensland on the Gold Coast. Just wondering how it was filming such a quintessential Australian story. American story in Australia. But I have another little question because I live in France and the French call you Mr. Honks. You could be Mr. Hunks, but how do you feel that how they pronunciate your name? I think it's quite cool.
Oh, my kids call me Tam Honks anyway, so that's all right. I'll speak for everybody. We could not have had a better quarters than we had in Queensland there on the Broad Beach. I'm not quite sure why bin chickens are as prevalent as they are, those prehistoric-looking birds that are absolutely everywhere. The crew was an extraordinary collection of great, hardworking people. The climate was fantastic. Every morning I got up to a view there on the 43rd floor of our towering condominium that could see all the way into New South Wales. That's how high it was. But I will say that one thing that was frustrating, because we did shoot this under the COVID protocols, so there were a lot of people who did not see each other every day. As a matter of fact, the joy of a common hair and makeup trailer was lost. We were all separated, so I never got to see Austin until he walked onto the set, fully done up in his alter ego as Captain Marvel Jr. So it was not the easiest circumstances in order to make a movie, but I have to say, it's a fabulous studio. The film industry down there is as great as exists anywhere in the world, and I would return on a moment's notice to the same place, just not quite without the same amount of COVID attention that we all had when we were down there. But it's a great place to make a movie.
We have a question over there.
Hello, my name is Elvis Cannes. I'm a French journalist. Thank you for the spectacular movie. Last night, Priscilla Presley was in the theater. So, how involved were the Presley family and estate in the making of the movie? Was there a close collaboration with them? And what was the response of Priscilla Presley when she first discovered the movie? And just for the actors, for Tom Hanks and Austin, what was the main challenge for you to embody your characters?
Okay, well, the first part of it, do you know, in the field is what I call it. You know, when I went and met Sam Bell to meet people, I met with Jerry early on, Jerry Schilling early on, a great friend. And I got to have several lovely dinners and meetings with Priscilla. Now, I want to make something really clear, and I want to make this clear so that you understand, and I know she's in the house, that there's no connection. The success of the film, this is her life. And I met with Priscilla, I met with Lisa Marie and Kylie and Riley, Keogh, granddaughter. And I want you to understand that what happens is I had to go away and make the film. COVID happened. I was constantly having to rewrite to try and keep all these balls in the air, and also to truly find the movie. And we both went through personal things, which I'd rather not go into. So pretty much after those initial get-togethers, I was unable to engage in the way I normally would. I have no fear of actually reading scripts and all of that going along. But a long time passed, and I understood absolutely, and I'm not sure where Priscilla is right now, but... Not here, okay. Well, if she was, I'd say it during the room. I understand the trepidation, anxiety, maybe even skepticism of what we would do with the story of her husband, of Lisa Marie's father, and Riley's grandfather. And there was trepidation. I just couldn't get there. Like, it was, if I just didn't keep the balls moving, they would fall on the ground. And so, really late, much later than I would ever like it to happen, we I had to screen probably about the third, fourth cut of it. You know, have to understand too, you have to test, and then there's budgets and visual effects and all this sort of thing. So anyway, I'm in the air, and Austin there too. And I know for everybody here, Livy, everybody, but Austin and I would communicate. I said, I've got the, you know, it was, I think Priscilla had fear about seeing it too. So much has been said about the icon Elvis, like his wallpaper, he's been a god, you know, so much, you know, so many things that are just not true. What would we do? Would we lean into this and that? Anyway, you know, by the way, you know, criticism of anything you make, I'm used to it. And just like Elvis said, you know, critical people have their job. And some do it well and some not so. You know, I like critical people who do homework because I'm big on homework. But no critique, no review was ever going to mean more to us than the review of the woman who was married to Elvis Presley. And I can't tell you, I know I speak for Austin, everyone who knew, how our stomachs felt when she went in with Jerry to see that movie. I can't tell you how long that 2 hours was. And I happened to be caught on a plane. So I heard a story when I landed. I was like on the phone, and there was a security guard with Priscilla who was crying. And I said, well, what's going on? Why? And she said, because of Priscilla's state. And I was like, oh, God, what have I done? And then she wrote a note. She said, I'm sorry it took so long. I just had to gather myself. And I think I can say this because she said it now. And she said, I just wasn't ready for that. I don't know. She said, every breath about Austin, every move, the spirit of the person, the humanity, the man, not the icon, not the guy in the trashy book, not the person that someone thinks they know because they've made it up in their head. She said, if my husband was here today, he would look him in the eye and say, hot damn, you are me. And then with Lisa, she had the screening. And always remember, I don't want to tell all of it because some of it's personal, but she looked up to the sky as I took her to the car, and I thought she was going to say, I can't put it into, I thought she was going to say words, but she said a value. And then she mentioned, and Jerry said it too, and Priscilla said it too, I think it's important to them. He was a father. He was a husband and a grandfather, a person. And they have children, and their children will have children. And the greatest review I've ever got in my life is from them saying, and now there's something they can look to that in their view is the truth of the humanity of the man. So that will be the best review I know I've ever had. Yeah.
And to answer your question about the most challenging part about it, it's such a tricky thing because when I first started, I had I put these unrealistic expectations on myself that somehow, if I worked hard enough, I could make my face identical to Elvis's face. And that my eyes would look exactly like Elvis's eyes, and you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. And I realized that at a certain point, that becomes like going to the wax museum. And what is really important is that his soul comes out. And so just like I was saying about stripping everything away, it was finding the balance between getting as specific as I possibly could, and that meant just endless research. I would watch one clip of I mean, just to take an example, Milton Berle, Hound Dog. I mean, you know, I watched 1 second of this clip over and over and over, and look at what his eyes were doing. Look at the angle of his head. Look at what his hand was doing, and try to find it exactly, and practice that until it was in my marrow, and then the tricky thing is being able to be there on the day and have it feel like it's happening for the first time, and that it's spontaneous and it's actually alive. And the reason why he moved in that way and why he spoke in that way, and that meant finding his inner being. But then it's like spinning plates, because you want to go back to the specifics. And so is this constant back and forth. And I know, even watching, somebody asked me yesterday, did you watch playback when we were filming? And I said there were certain moments, like watching Hound Dog, where we did one take, and then I went back and I watched it, and I thought,
what's wrong?
Oh, what's wrong?
Yeah.
I'm doing too much. And so then strip it back, and try to get to the point where it's just, you have to get through the nerves of it and then just feel the life. So like you say, I mean, Baz read Priscilla's text message to me when we were driving to dinner, just the two of us in the car, and it just brought tears to my eyes, because ultimately, you know, there's never been a person who I've never met that I've loved more than Elvis. You know, I've lived with him now for it's 3 years. So the feeling of doing him justice to his legacy, and really bring life to this extraordinary man, and to make Lisa Marie and Priscilla and Riley and the entire family proud, that I could not be more overjoyed, and I just feel over the moon about that. Thank you.
I think Jason has a question.
Jason Gorber from Canada. Thanks, Baz, for the compliment yesterday. I appreciate it on my shirt. I want to talk about the music.
Someone should redo that show.
Please do Jesus Christ Superstar again. Nothing would make me happier. Let's just throw that out there. I
have in fact talked to Andrew years ago about it.
Thank you. Let's just get that on the record. I want to talk about the musicality. I want to talk about the use of music.
Sure.
One of the things that you're very famous for, the fragmentation of tunes, the integration of mashups and all those elements. You had a freedom and a liberty to do that with Elvis's tracks.
Yes.
You did different instrumentation. Can you talk about the challenges of doing that and still making it sound both contemporary and classic?
Yes.
And if I could talk to Alton, but especially Austin. Austin, there's moments in this film where I thought your head was put on a CGI Elvis, not only in terms of your physical performance, but also the musical performance. If you two can talk about actually bringing these iconic performers to life through your vocal performances, and how through music you embody character and how all those elements. So thank you very much.
Great question. The first part is very simple. I mean, you know, people say what they say. And I make my movies, like Sam said, for now, but for the future too. I want them to go on. Now, one of the most important rules of the kind of language that I do is immense historical research. I know I mean, I have a label, House of Iona with RCA. I've had it for years. So I had access to unbelievable takes of Elvis, material you've never heard him sing, the Beatles, things like that. But one of the things that's always important, and I did this on Gatsby, whether you agreed with it or not, but when Fitzgerald wrote and put basically an emerging black street music called jazz into his novel, as a relatively young writer, he was criticized for that, because jazz, it's going to be a fad. It was sort of, it was like early hip hop. I mean, I did the Get Down, you know, working with Flash and Herc. You know, they thought that music would never get outside the Bronx, right? They were kids, right? And so now it's the biggest genre in the world. So when I did Gatsby, the whole thing is to respect the music and have the classics. And we have Elvis singing as Elvis. We have Austin singing classic, Hound Dog as Elvis, right? But I also want it to be I want to be present now. It's what it was, but then the translation, the idea of, say, taking Black American street music, hip hop, which I did with Jay-Z on Gatsby, is what did it feel like? What did that music feel like? Because as terrific as Hound Dog might be, it's charming. At best, you play that song, it's charming or it's got a good beat. Now, by the way, Hound Dog was written by two white Jewish composers, Lieber and Stoller. It was covered by Big Mama Thornton, which is done so wonderfully and played so wonderfully by a gospel singer we discovered in the South, Shonka. Now, when she says the lines in that song, they were sort of edgy, salacious, rude, unacceptable in polite society way of saying, listen, you've been expletive around, right? Don't come sniffing at my door and expect expletive. You can hit the expletive road, Jack. So I have that song in there. But as Austin's walking down the street, Doja Cat is translating it into rap so that younger audiences who really don't know Elvis except for Lilo and Stitch, right? Or maybe there's a video game, he's that guy in the white suit, understand how edgy that music was, what that music felt like at that time. So it's what it was, but what it actually felt like. And so that's why I do it, not to be groovy or to have a groovy album or whatever. I do it because I want a younger audience to feel what it was like. Elvis's early recordings are lovely. They're lovely, but they're polite and charming. But I've got a recording of an interview with Colonel Tom Parker. It's a very rare recording. And he's talking in the foreground. And in the background, you can hear some country and western singers. And then you hear this keening. Keening is the sound of screaming. And Elvis comes on stage. And everything I've read, even speaking to people who'd seen him, I mean, he used to spit at the audience, roll on the ground. He did, in fact, hump that plastic dog. I mean, he was the original punk rocker. And the music was so much more aggressive and feedback and louder and scratchy and crazy. So that's why at Rustwood, everything at Rustwood has a historical reference, but we moved it all into one concert. But that performance at Rustwood, that sort of punk rock performance, that's real. He did that. I just want the audience who don't care about Elvis, the younger audience, to feel what it was like to be there. So that's why I do that work.
Unfortunately, Elvis has to leave the building. This is all the time we have. So Sky, Catherine, Alton, Tom, Baz, Austin, Olivia, Gail, and Patrick, thank you very much.